Welcome back, everybody, to Risk Takers and Trailblazers, the podcast where we sit down with leaders, innovators, and change makers who are helping shape the future of our industry through courage, connection, and authenticity. Around here, we talk a lot about leadership, growth, resilience, and what it really looks like to navigate change, not just professionally, but personally too. Today's conversation is one I think a lot of leaders will see themselves in. It's about those moments where on the surface, everything is working, but something doesn't feel aligned anymore. And what it actually looks like to evolve your leadership in a way that feels more human, more intentional, and ultimately more impactful. We're really excited today to be joined by Jen Weigel. Jen is a leader in our industry who has been doing some incredible work, not just in how she leads teams, but in how she's been rethinking leadership all together through her coaching lens. And I will say I've had the opportunity to experience this personally as I am one of her coaching clients. It's something that really changes how you think about leadership when you get a chance to work with an executive coach and work on your growth. So I'm very excited to have you here today, Jen. But before I officially welcome you to the podcast, I have to say, we did a little Instagram stalking and we came across this.
I mean, okay, talk about trailblazing. Women in rock and roll is the coolest / sexiest thing ever. That is like, wow. Wow.
Yeah. What an intro. What an
You guys
intro.
are making me blush over here. Oh my goodness. Okay. What a way to start.
So with that, Jen, maybe tell us about your very diverse background and your leadership background and what led you to become an executive coach.
Sure. Goodness. This starts way back in the day. And I'm a small town kid from small town Alberta who had big dreams, as most small town kids do, to go to the big city one day and, make something of yourself. And I would have to say that even way back when, I had the ambition, but I didn't have the language and the words yet. And my personal mantra is better as possible. And I start there because that literally drives every single decision I make, every single thought, every single action comes down to that simple phrase, better as possible. But where that started for me was, being a young kid and wondering what the heck do you do with the rest of your life? And I knew I wanted to go to school. I knew I wanted to get an education. I had no idea where that was going to take me. I remember my mom inspiring me at one point in my life saying, maybe you should get into finance. You have a lot of technical skills when it comes to, my high school education, and it just seemed to line up. And so I did that. I went to business school. I took a finance and marketing major. And from there, I discovered this passion for music. I kind of thought it would always just be this hobby that I did. But after high school, I started to pursue it even further. I joined a local group, a local rock band. That was kind of where I got my start, as two brothers that I went to school with, and they really taught me the ropes. I'm not from a musical family at all, and there was just some sort of calling there for me, and I knew I had to go after it. And I thought business school would be a really great way to, be taking that to the next level. How do bands, go from the basement or the garage to the national level? And that's kind of where my love of business started. And so from there, I had to fulfill an internship as a part of my business practicum, and I ended up in a financial advisor's office. My boss saw the hustle, and he offered me a full-time job if I would do my rest of my business degree part-time. So that's what I did. I was paying for it myself, and that was a really attractive offer to start making money and start paying back those loans. So I thought being a financial advisor was going to be my career path until about 6 years into that career, and music was still happening in the background. And we ended up having a song kind of make its way to radio because I was very relentless at pursuing what it meant to be a professional musician. From there, we had a very fun few years on the road. And why I bring that up is because I would have to say that really gave me such a strong start into what it really takes to be a leader, what it really takes to be somebody who thinks like an entrepreneur. Because, if you want to share a product such as music, there's a lot of competition. There's a lot of other people that are trying to do the same thing. And so you had to be really smart. You had to be really creative. You had to think outside the box, and you had to do it all yourself. Unless you had a record deal, you're the ones pounding the pavement. You're the ones loading your gear into the van every night and then driving 12 hours to the next town and setting it all up again and doing it all over while you're trying to do interviews and things on the road, which I know you ladies know all about, because that's how you kick it in the business world, right? That's how you make a name for yourself. We did that for a long time. And then we started to get old and have partners and want to pursue careers that didn't drain your bank account. So that's where I ended up in general insurance. I started with State Farm, went through the Desjardins buyout. From there, moved into the broker world. And I gotta say, what led me all the way now into coaching would be the pursuit for better. Like I said at the beginning, everything about every decision and step I took throughout my entire journey so far has been in the pursuit of being better. It went from being a better musician, being a better business person, to being a better leader, and now really just to be a better human. And that's where coaching kind of comes in. And when you lead people, if you don't understand people and you don't have the ability to hold space for people, I think you're going to have a really hard time, regardless of how much technical knowledge or strategy you have. If you don't think of people as human beings and have the skill set to really care for them in a way that they need, you're gonna hit this plateau. And I found myself there in leadership. It became about striving and achieving for so long until that doesn't get you anywhere anymore. And from there, I needed to figure out, how can I be better, right? I felt a sense of responsibility to be a better leader. So, there's only so many business courses you can take that'll help you with that. And I went through an executive coaching program myself, and it was life-changing. It really just taught you how to stand more firmly in the ground, knowing who you are and how you want to show up in the world, because that's more difficult than I think any of us want to admit, right? Who are we as a human? How do we want to show up? And then how do you use that for better in the world? So I pursued taking some courses now for executive coaching so that I can have a similar impact on all of those around me that my coach had on me. And she helped me see the world in a completely new way.
Can I add one note there? I know we're going totally off of what we wanted to talk about, but you mentioned something about just being like a better human and like how you put yourself out there. And one thing clicked in my head, as I'm a client of yours. I'm a coaching client, but you used to be a client of the company that I worked for. So you were one of my clients. And we were going through this is just like a Jen story I'm throwing out in the midst, but we were going through a really challenging time where things weren't working the way that we all had hoped would be, on a timeline we all really wanted to stick to. And, we were saying to you, our client, we're going to make this right. And I know we had a really great, I'm sure still do, partnership in that communication. And then you sent a personal email to us and said, how are you guys doing? You thought about us in that situation. And that was so touching. Like, you're in a frustrating position. You're the client. You're paying the bills. You're not getting your deliverable at that moment. And you cared about the people on the other end. And you sent us such a kind message. Like, I just in the way you were talking, I'm like, I remember how that made me feel. And I remember how people on my team messaged me saying it made them feel.
Thank you for sharing. That's, you just get to a point in life where you don't do it for those types of comments, but Thank you.
Speaking of leading with empathy, there is a lot of emotional weight that we carry as leaders, and it takes a toll. What does that emotional weight look like day to day for you, Jen?
I think that's one of the challenges in leadership is how do you show up an authentic way while also leading people when they look to you for support and guidance and kind of being that lighthouse, how do you guide them through change or difficult times or chaos when we might all be going through that internally at the same time, right? When you walk into the organization, do you leave that at the door and you push through and you show up anyways and you don't say anything, or do you say something? And for a long time, I never did. And the impact that had was not favorable. It showed up in stress and burnout. And ultimately, the conclusion I came to is you got to share, you got to be open and honest with your team because we're all just humans at the end of the day. And we all go through really hard things. And almost everybody you meet has a story that impacts how they want to show up in the world. And I just couldn't hold it in anymore. I was kind of embarrassed about it at first, to be honest, and mortified afterwards that I was like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I just shared with them everything that's going on in my life. And what that looked like was multiple pregnancy losses, the loss of some family members that were really close to me, my niece being one, being pregnant with my son who was delivered extremely prematurely as a result of multiple stresses kind of going on in life at the same time. All the while, you're supposed to kind of walk through the door and show up as a leader and guide people with certainty. And I was really struggling with that, to be honest. I would share with them what I was going through. And instead of being met with worry and anxiety from a team that looks to you for leadership, it was met with kindness and caring and compassion and how can we help you and support you. And I wasn't expecting that, to be honest. And it had such a profound impact on me. And the result of that was a closer team. It was, showing up to work with people that have your back. And when you put everything into it, they were even more capable of stepping up in those times to show up in a way that I didn't expect. And, when you talk about psychological safety in a workplace, you would think vulnerability might not be the key to that, but it most certainly is. At least that's been my experience so far. So what I was doing wasn't working, and that was trying to shoulder it and just walk in there and leave it at the door and put it behind me and be the kind of leader that I thought they needed. And that just wasn't working. And it was creating distance instead of connection. You walk this really difficult road, and if you're not open and honest, you're modeling something that you don't want your team to do, right? So I had to learn to receive the way I wanted to care for my team, right? If they were going through something, I wanted to be there for them and stand in for them and support them. And I don't know why I didn't think I deserved the same thing. And I think that's so difficult being a mom and a leader and, a colleague, right? Is allowing yourself the ability to receive that kind of care back when you're so used to just providing it. And it's life-changing, ladies. It's life-changing.
What did that look like for you to build, like to open up those conversations that you mentioned, but also to build that area of trust and that safety?
Yeah, I think that had to start with myself because we can say we want to lead by example, but what we're doing often is the exact opposite, right? And so if I'm showing up and not being open and honest and transparent and vulnerable with my team, there's no way they're going to do that with me. And so I had to make the really hard decision to do it first. And so that started with talking with my leaders and saying, hey, this is what's going on in my life. And I don't necessarily need you to do anything, but I need you to be aware that if I'm not myself today, or if I'm not myself some days, this is what's going on in the background. When you model that and you show what's possible, it makes it safer for others to do the same thing. And just naturally, it kind of flows through the organization when you make people feel seen and heard and cared for. That just builds trust and safety. And when you just actually genuinely care about people, it'll come through.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that and being so open with your story. That means a lot. And I know that means a lot to other listeners and viewers who may have been going through similar things. And I think for me, a lesson I learned a long time ago, actually 9 years ago, when I was on maternity leave, and I was posting on my Instagram all the happy moments with my newborn baby. As you do, you post the best moments. And I had another new mom message me on Instagram being like, it looks like motherhood is so easy for you. I'm really struggling. How is it so easy for you? And I messaged her back right away. I'm like, I'm actually had to be hospitalized for really bad postpartum. And I'm heavily medicated and it's not been easy. And that's when I realized how important it is to share the harder stories, because we're putting in the universe unreasonable standards and unreasonable expectations of how we show up all the time. And no leader, not one individual, whether you're a parent or you're a leader of an organization, can be 100% the best version of themselves all the time. And I think it's in those stories of intense vulnerability where we make those connections and where we grow as individuals and as a team. So thank you for sharing that, Jen.
That's so true. You know, we get trained by societal expectations of what it means to, you know, show up in life. And that leads to intense loneliness. And how come it's not easy for me? Like this mom pointed out to you, right? And I think we do have a duty to be sharing the messiness of life.
So, Jen, just to talk a little bit more about the executive coaching, because I've recently am starting to see an executive coach. And the reason why I'm seeing an executive coach is because I want to be the best version of myself. Like I want to be, as you said, I want to be as grounded as I can so I can show up the best possible leader for my team. And I do think there are parallels, and I think there are lessons to be learned with being a parent, because you have to regulate yourself so much as a parent. And the same thing goes, I think there's a connection there, regulating yourself as a parent and also grounding yourself as a leader. Do you feel that way, or are you finding that?
Absolutely. You know, it's interesting you say that, because I bring that up as an example all the time in coaching or just talking with our team members here, right? Oftentimes our leaders will say, you know, this person maybe isn't retaining this, or I don't know how to communicate correctly. They're not understanding. How do I make the importance of this clear? You know, all of that comes down to how do we want to show up for our kids? It's often very similar in how do you want to show up in leadership, right? Because we care about our people, we care about our teammates, we care about the impact we're having on a day-to-day basis, whether it be a child or a colleague or a friend. I think about it the same way in leadership. You know, what kind of an impact can I have? How do I want our team to show up and how do I want them to be feeling every single day? And how can we help that? How can we show up and be better humans so that we're modeling that? So yeah, I think you're bang on, Tanya. I think there's a ton of parallels, but it ultimately comes down to who do we want to be in this world? And then ultimately you have to ask the question of who am I, right? Because if you don't know who you are, how do you know how to show up?
It's so funny because when you said that, it reminded me of one of our sessions, which I mean, I can share because I guess it's my session, but where I keep saying like, I want to show up authentic. I want to be authentic. I want to be my authentic self. And then I took a step back and I'm like, who is Diane authentic? Like, what does that mean? Who, you know, like if I say, oh, that is authentically me, what is that list? Like, what does that look like? And how do I show up that way if I don't even know what that is? It's definitely, you know, there's a lot of catchwords and things people want to do, but unless you do the work behind it all, you're not going to get anywhere. But one thing that I wanted to ask you, and you mentioned your team, you know, how you're there for your team and how you're helping them, but how would you describe maybe being a mentor or like mentorship for your team and the difference that coaching is, how that differs between mentorship.
The analogy that I've been kind of playing around with is, as a mentor, it's kind of like handing you my map. This is where I've been. These are the obstacles and the barriers that I had to overcome. This is the road I had to take a couple detours along the way. But this is ultimately where I ended up. And then you have this like nice formed little roadmap. And through mentorship, you kind of hand that over to somebody and go, here you go, right? I'm going to walk you through this map. I'm going to take you through every step of the journey. And what I realized through that process was, that's my map. And who am I to say that you should be following the same route or the same journey? And that was very eye-opening to me when it came to my relationship with mentorship versus coaching. And what coaching does instead is says, what's important to you and where do you want to go? And what does that journey look like for you? And then I will support you along the way and I will follow you. Coaching is holding you capable and understanding who you are as a human, what's important to you, and helping you learn along the way. My mentor coach just said something to me that was so profound in one of our recent sessions. And he had said, Jen, do not rob your coachee of the joy of discovery. And I was just like, oh my gosh. Because even in coaching, you can ask questions that can be really leading, right? Because we have a picture in our minds through our experiences of where we think that person should go. That's not the job. The job is to know, where do you want to go and how do I support you in getting there? And those aha moments, those discovery moments, those like, oh my gosh moments are just so incredible. And you can never rob somebody of the joy of that discovery. And that's the difference between coaching and mentoring.
You talked a lot about discovering who you are first. Like, how do you do that? Because I ask because I feel like I have an extra layer of difficulty because I'm neurodiverse and I've been masking for 40 years. And I feel like I have a really hard time understanding my authentic self because I'm a chameleon. I've just learned to fit in, I have to mimic the people around me. So what's some advice or techniques you could give to anybody struggling to figure out who their authentic self is?
Great question. And the true coach in me would have to throw that back at you and say something like, I know, right? If you were to tell me who you were without using titles, experience, any of this chameleon masking thing that we've done, you know, you're a mom, you're a marketing specialist, a musician, if you strip that all away, who are you as a human and how would you show up? There was no boundaries, no expectations, no identity crisis kind of at the center of it. If you were just to walk into a room without any of that, without any of those sweaters on, I talk about this sweater analogy that has really helped me. And I come back to it often where I think I made a post about this on LinkedIn recently where I had a friend who had said, you know, Jen, you remind me of the scene in Friends where Joey comes out of his apartment wearing every single piece of clothing he has on him, right? It's just layer after layer after layer after layer, because that's what it feels like to carry grief, expectation, guilt, all of these unnamed emotions and things that kind of go on in the backgrounds that make us the chameleons that we are, Tanya. What would it be like to, you know, take those off? Oftentimes it feels like people are like tugging at those threads, right? Mm-hmm. And our response is immediately, I just want to put on another sweater because it makes me feel more safe and comfortable. That extra layer of protection between me and the world. And what I realized through this whole journey is you have to create an environment that makes that person want to take that sweater off themselves. So what would it be like to be in a room without all that weight? Whatever that weight represents for you. Who are you?
That is a big question, Jen. I don't know. I think that's the scary part. I think that
Yeah.
we're so saddled with expectation that it is really difficult to know who we are at the core when we don't have those roles or expectations to play, especially when you layer on perfectionism on top of that. I think I would just be nerdy and awkward. I go back to my 10-year-old self before really society put so much pressure. And I'd wear my sparkly nail polish and I'd do all the science fiction, nerdy music things. And I would say the wrong words at the wrong time. And that's okay.
So why aren't we doing that more, right? Why aren't you doing that?
I think there's expectation as leaders that you're never wrong and you're articulate and confident. And there is, and I see it, and I see it all the time, people who are socially awkward don't make it as easily as leaders. It's talked about, like that charisma, that they're easygoing with people. And I think I had to really learn that charisma. It wasn't natural for me. And then we actually go back to the research, the leadership research that really shows how valuable introverted leaders are.
But I think that's a beautiful thing about going through that process. And I know you asked for tactics and strategies there, Tanya, but it's very difficult to just say, this is the steps you have to take, and then you'll discover who you are, and that'll be it. It's a discovery process. And until you take the time to slow down and ask yourself those questions and say, why am I showing up like this? Who am I trying to impress? Or who is providing these expectations? From there, it's like you feel your feet a little more firmly planted on the ground that you're standing on.
Mm-hmm.
And that you're a little more confident in saying what you need to say, or making a decision the way you make a decision, or not, or walking away from something. Like you said, this alignment piece is so key and critical to who we are. When you come to that moment in life, it just kind of hits you like a ton of bricks, and you go, where did I go wrong? What the heck happened? How did I lead myself astray? It seems crazy, honestly, when you break it down, to go, of course I know who I am. Of course I know what I value. Of course I can make these decisions to walk away. But that's way easier said than done when you're in those moments. And the tactic or strategy I would suggest then is just to kind of slow down and just to start asking yourself those questions. Why am I saying the things I'm saying? Why am I being this chameleon? Why am I showing up the way I am? Who am I doing this for? Because it most certainly isn't myself. But until you know who you are, how do you move forward from that?
Mm-hmm.
And when you model that and you show up like that every single day, even in the messiness of it, because I'm telling you, I show up to work in the mess of that every single day still, that gives permission almost to your team to do the same thing. Because ultimately, you don't want them feeling that way. And that's how I view leadership. Is I know what it feels like to stand on that unshaky ground and not know what to do.
Mm-hmm.
How powerful would it be to have a leader or a friend or a colleague or a parent that could go, that's okay. I've been there too. I'm not going to necessarily hand you my map because that's mine.
Mm-hmm.
And that might not make sense for you. But let's start here and support you along the way on your journey, and let's create your map for you and what that might look like.
My question to you was going to be, what does better as possible mean today as a leader? But I think you just very clearly answered that in what you see.
Yeah, I think we show up as humans first.
Yeah.
And take it from there, right?
Jen, if someone listening right now feels like they're in that place carrying a lot and not quite sure how to shift, what would you want them to know?
That they're worth it. I think all of us struggle with that, and that they matter. You know, that was a discovery that I made through my coaching program that stems from obviously years past and years of doing everything for everybody else and putting everybody else first, right? And in so many situations, we have no choice but to do that as leaders and parents. You just have to know that there's so many people out there that care for you and that you matter and that you're worth it, and that all of the time and investment that you put into figuring out who you are is going to have such a profound impact on all of those around you. And you don't even know it yet. So just keep going, one foot in front of the other, and honor yourself. Because we don't do that enough and we don't see that modeled enough. And it's like when you drop a rock, into water and the multiple ripples that it can have.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes you don't even know how far those ripples stretch. But that we're all capable of it. And we just need more people dedicated to supporting all of us who are standing on that unshaky ground.
Jen, I love this conversation. This was so great. And I love that final wrap up, like just nailed it. There's so much in here that we've talked about that I know people are going to take a ton away from this conversation. It's a real reminder that leadership isn't about having all the answers. I think we all struggle with that, but it's just about creating the space for others to find their own answers, really, like you mentioned. So thank you again for everything you've talked about today.
Well, thank you, ladies, for having me. I'm so honored, and I really appreciate being able to share this space with you.
Thank you. And please follow Jen on LinkedIn. And please subscribe if you haven't already to the Risk Takers YouTube channel. And we're soon launching our audio podcast, which we're really excited about. So thank you. And we'll see you at the next one.